Okay, cool. Seems like everything works well. Cool. So hello, everyone, and welcome back to another AMA. This time, it's really focused on research. We normally do them on Discord, but we decided to go live on YouTube. Let's see how this works. So always, feedback is always welcome. So today we invited Iker, research scientist at Lisk. He is also the author of our most recent research blog post, also part of the Lisk Interoperability blog post series, the Lifecycle of a Sidechain in the Lisk Ecosystem. So welcome, Iker.
Thank you, Monica.
Thanks for being here. I think that's a really great opportunity for everyone to ask questions. I think the blog post was, personally, I had really enjoyed reading it. Very interesting and also pretty well written and clear to show the life cycle of a sidechain. That's something that definitely the community was looking forward to know more about. So that's your chance to ask questions. So make sure to ask all your questions in the chat. On YouTube, we welcome any questions related to this topic or research-related questions. Okay, let's see. Miguel is going to collect the questions, and we are going to try to answer them. We also collected some questions on Discord before the AMA from people who couldn't attend the live AMA. So I'm going to start with that before everyone joins us online and ask the questions. The first question was asked by a community member. What is the role of the delegates on the Lisk mainchain for the registration of a new sidechain? Do they need to do something special?
Yeah, so they don't have any specific role. Like they will do business as usual. Like just they have to take care of their Lisk mainchain node. Nothing like specific transactions, signing transactions, or a sidechain node or anything. But what they have to do, and this is not specific to the registration, but to the whole new interoperability and in concrete to the new Lisk BFT, they will need to generate and sign certificates every round, at least at the end of every round. And that's it. I mean, those certificates, they have in principle nothing to do with other chains. They are just something that is like somehow attesting that a certain block was final. And those certificates that they are being generated automatically if the delegates are following the Lisk BFT algorithm as they should do. Those certificates, they will be used by users, in principle, those what we call relayers, to put them inside a cross-chain update transaction, which are those main data structures to realize interoperability. And with those, the relayer or the user getting those certificates and posting them into their sidechain, they are proving that a certain block was final in the Lisk mainchain, and therefore everything that happened before that block was final, which implies also any cross-chain transaction that was sent to the sidechain. So in summary, they don't have anything special. They will just do business as usual, continue running their node. But with the new Lisk BFT, they will be generating these certificates, which are very important and are a central part for interoperability.
Yeah. Okay, that's very interesting, and I think very useful information for the delegates. So good question. Another question also coming from the community on Discord. What is the maximum number of sidechain that can be registered in the Lisk ecosystem?
Yeah, so I think that one I briefly mentioned during the Lisk.js in my presentation, because, this blog post is somehow in parallel to that presentation, but we'll say more into detail, but yeah. So the maximum number of sidechains to be registered. So there is no limit for sidechains, how many sidechains can be registered in the Lisk ecosystem. And by extension, there is no limit on how many sidechains can be active in the Lisk ecosystem. Unlike other projects, like for example, Polkadot, is the most with these parachains that they have, you will have, now around 100 maximum number of parachains and so on. Or for example, Ethereum 2.0, I think, it's not the same, but you have, or the last time I checked, they were planning to have 64 shards at maximum. So in our case, it's not like that. You can register as many sidechains as you want. The ecosystem can run as many sidechains as it can, physically. But the thing is, the limit here, of course, there is a limit. There is no unlimited scalability. The limit here is how these sidechains are going to use the block size of the Lisk mainchain. Because these sidechains, they will like to interact with the mainchain or with other sidechains, and for that, they will send these cross-chain update transactions on the Lisk mainchain. So there will be a limit, at this theoretical limit, that if you have more than n sidechains and they want to use the limited block size in the Lisk mainchain, they either the fees are going to be very high for the next transaction, or there is not going to be more space. So we put the limit in the block size of the mainchain and not in the number of sidechains. And of course, this that being said, this doesn't mean that we have. How we envision this interoperability and the concept of a sidechain. The sidechain implements or deploys a specific blockchain application. So most of the things that will happen will be in a specific blockchain and not cross-chain interaction. So that means that we have still a lot of room to growth in the ecosystem, to have many sidechains until we have so many cross-chain updates flowing that the Lisk mainchain will need to also have like a new update and make the blocks bigger, for example, as a quick improvement. But yeah, in principle, most of the activity will happen in intra-chain. So this limit with cross-chain updates in the Lisk mainchain is still very far away and many orders of magnitude away from the typical ecosystem that have a specific limit in sidechains or parachains in Polkadot, for example.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for the answer. Also, pretty interesting question. Also, good to look at the other projects, and I know you are at the research team. You are doing that regularly. Another question that I see from Discord: what is a sidechain? What if a sidechain had no cross-chain messages to pass to other chains in 1 month? Would it be terminated?
Oh yeah, okay. So that's an interesting one to make clear, at least, because we have this concept of sidechain termination in the ecosystem. First, sidechain termination doesn't mean that the sidechain dies or doesn't exist anymore. No, it is what is terminated is the connection of the sidechain to the ecosystem. So it's when the sidechain is terminated, it's no longer part of the Lisk ecosystem. That's to make it clear. But yeah, in our specifications, we say that the sidechain, to stay active, not to be terminated, has to post one cross-chain update transaction every month, every 30 days. And it can be the direct question after that is like, okay, maybe my sidechain doesn't have enough activity, or it can be that my blockchain application is most of the things happen, let's say, in my blockchain, and I don't need to cross-chain anything, like send anything cross-chain in many weeks. So I can have this problem, right? But that's the solution, or the thing behind that is not every cross-chain update needs to have a cross-chain transaction or cross-chain messages in this case. A cross-chain update transaction can be only a certificate coming from the sidechain, and the rest, like the payload of the cross-chain update, will be empty without any message. So that's the key. Like sidechains, every now and then they can post one cross-chain update without any message, just the certificate, showing that they are still alive and progressing the state that they have in the main chain, or basically like showing them that my state is progressing, my heights are progressing, and I'm still alive. So there is no limit we have the flexibility of sending cross-chain updates without messages, cross-chain updates without certificates, with some specific conditions. But yeah, there is no problem, I would say, on doing that every once in a month.
Okay, that's good to know. Okay, the network identifier of a sidechain is computed during sidechain registration, but in the blog post you say that it can be pre-computed. How does that work?
Okay, that's an interesting one, because what is the main purpose of this network identifier, especially in ecosystem, or like yes, an ecosystem with many blockchains, is that we don't want them to have like same kind of sign-in function, so that they can have this replay attack, right? Like this, I can reuse the same transaction from sidechain A and post it in sidechain B and steal some funds, or like at least make some users lose some fund. And yeah, so we were thinking about how to do that properly, because those network identifiers, they have to be unique for every blockchain, like one per blockchain. But at the same time, we want to have the flexibility that developers can start the sidechain without being part of the ecosystem, or the other way around. As soon as the sidechain starts, they are already part of the ecosystem. So how we did that? We defined the network identifier of a sidechain to be, at least the input to compute it is the ID of the Genesis block of the sidechain, which is something fixed and known by the sidechain developers. Of course, they are developing the Genesis block, so they should have the ID of this block. And then also, the other input is the address of the sender of the registration transaction of the sidechain in the main chain. So with these two things, you have the network identifier, and it's going to be unique, because either the Genesis block is unique, or where you are sending, from which account you are sending the transaction is you cannot send it. There is only one possibility. So with that, you solve the problem of uniqueness, and also you can solve the problem of flexibility to start the sidechain. Why? Because if you have the Genesis block of your sidechain is computed, you know the ID, that's something fixed. And in beforehand, you can say, okay, this sidechain is going to be registered with from this account. By this account is going to send the sidechain registration transaction, and it's going to be registered. So as I know beforehand which account is going to send that, because either is my account or my group of developers account, like a multisig, they know in advance which one is going to be the address. So they say, okay, with that, I have both components to calculate the network identifier. And without needing registering this sidechain, I know already the network identifier. So I can start already with my sidechain as an independent blockchain without needing of registering it. And that's the idea here. So you can pre-compute that network identifier beforehand, be months, even years, without being part of the ecosystem. And then from one moment on, you say, okay, now we are ready to connect to the ecosystem, and we register the sidechain. But yeah, that's the idea. So these two inputs to compute the network identifier, they can be known beforehand, so they can be used in that, with that flexible way, before or after the registration.
Okay, thank you for the explanation. I see already some questions coming from the chat. So Moonfern is asking, so let's assume that A is an isolated blockchain built with the Lisk SDK, same as B. Can A register only to B and vice versa without involving Lisk mainnet chain?
Okay. So yes, theoretically they can do that, but they are not going to be part of the Lisk ecosystem. Well, if you're asking about the technical part, one of these, if we are using the technical solution of our Lisk Interoperability, one of these, A or B, they will need to do the mainchain role. So with some special requirements, and the other one has to do the sidechain role, because here in our ecosystem, the mainchain has a specific role, and the sidechains they have another one. So one of these two, they have to do each of these roles, and then once that this happens, they can create like a parallel ecosystem, which is not going to be the Lisk ecosystem, because there is a main chain, like the sidechain B is now the blockchain B is going to be the main chain, and that can be totally spawn a new ecosystem there. That can be possible. They have to just, with the SDK, know what they require for to be a main chain and so on. But in principle, I would say that has no much, I mean, not so interesting, right? Because what you want to be is part of the Lisk ecosystem, which has already the ecosystem advantage, right? That not to be a parallel, isolated ecosystem there. But yeah, I mean, from the technical point of view, it's possible if you change a couple of things to be, so your blockchain has the main chain role, then you can do that. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you for the question, Munfern. Another question comes from Musti team. To register sidechain, we need to set initial set of validators of the chain. Is there a situation possible where this set is changed between sidechain registration transaction and acceptance from main?
Yes, that's a good question, and this can happen. And also, we have again the flexibility of saying we don't need to say, okay, we register this sidechain, and these validators they have to be the ones active between this time span. Otherwise, we cannot register it anymore because we changed the set, and then we have a problem. No, the thing is, and this is probably going to be better answered in the next blog post because we have one for how the certificates are generated. Yeah, with this new certificate generation idea, with the new BFT consensus, there is at least one certificate being generated every round if they are following the BFT consensus, the Lisk BFT consensus. So this means if the sidechain validators were active in a specific round, those that they were set in the registration transaction, and everything worked as expected, we know that there is going to be a valid certificate generated by these sidechain validators, and we can take this certificate, put it in a crosschain update, and then post this crosschain update to the main chain to effectively activate the main chain. So no matter, like, it can be that months, so you register the sidechain and then months later we activate it. That's not like the preferred solution, but it's still possible because, I mean, it's not the preferred solution in the way that you will have a lot of certificates after the first one to catch up. But still, I mean, it's possible in the way that for sure there is going to be a certificate generated by this specific set of validators, and we can use it to effectively activate the sidechain. So yeah, we still have this flexibility. But in general, yeah, I mean, there is no much reason to wait for, okay, we register our sidechain, and we know that this sidechain validators generated a certificate. Yeah, I mean, in principle, maybe there is something like, okay, I want to wait because I want to make sure that everything is working as expected in my sidechain, and so on. But yeah, I mean, probably there are some reasons to wait. But I would say again, if those sidechain, the set of validators were active for a certain round, there is a certificate, and the thing can be moved on, the sidechain activated, and things work as expected.
Great, interesting. Thank you, Musti, for the question. Another one from Shemer. How does the main chain keep track of Lisk on a sidechain, and what's the refresh rate of the data? If I had to use the recovery transaction in case of a sidechain failure, can the data be out of sync?
Okay, the first question, well, I think there are two questions, or they are somehow related, but the first question, again, this is the token module, the token standard that we defined. And this is, again, is going to be future blog post, I think, by Maxime, where this should be clear. I think is one of the important points. And this is how we do the escrow of tokens, of native tokens, because in this case there is no different role. Like if your sidechain has a native role, token, and main chain has idea to keep track of okay, my chain send this amount of native tokens to this sidechain or this other chain, this amount of native tokens to. So you keep track of that in your chain with this escrow account, and that's it. Like whenever you send a transaction sending some tokens, so a cross-chain transaction. Then this escrow is going to be updated, and we know that this sidechain has now those tokens. And this is important to respect this firewall property, right? In the way that if I send my sidechain send 20 tokens to the other sidechain, those 20 tokens are escrowed. So we know that there are going to be 20. And if the sidechain, because it was malicious, something bad happened in the other sidechain, is sending me back 25, I'm going to be like, okay, this is impossible. I just sent 20. I cannot receive now 25 back because I am the issuer of this token, is my native token. And this will imply the termination of this other sidechain in terms of the token module, in terms of the tokens. Like, okay, this sidechain did something bad. I am not going to send anything more to this sidechain, and we cut the connection in that regard. I think that's the first question somehow. The other one, can you repeat it? It was like the refreshing data.
What's the refresh rate of the data? If I had to use the recovery transaction in case of a sidechain failure, can the data be out of SIM?
Okay, that's also a good question, because it's not so. There can be some situations that, I mean, at least to understand this in one go, maybe it's not so. So the idea here is the refresh data. There is no other refresh of data apart from the cross-chain updates transaction that are posted from one chain to the other. So every new cross-chain update transaction is refreshing the data in the way that they are saying, okay, this is the new state for the state root, at least for my chain. This is the new cross-chain messages sent from this chain, and this is the new validator set. So all these things are contained in the cross-chain update, and that's how we refresh the data. So that's the every cross-chain update coming from a sidechain will update my information of that sidechain in my state. It can happen that a sidechain is terminated. Regarding the second part of the question, a sidechain is terminated because did something wrong or whatever, or just because inactivity, but it was still alive but not sending cross-chain updates, and it was terminated. And of course, the sidechain continued work as usual, progressing their state and adding blocks and so on. And in the moment that the sidechain account is terminated on mainchain, there was like a fixed state, hide, and all the information regarding the sidechain. That was when the termination occurred, and that's going to be what the mainchain knows about the sidechain, and it's not going to move forward from that point. So that's why the certain nodes, they should have these nodes or participants in the network, they should have this special role to be able to have proper sidechain recovery transactions, in the way that my node will have always a snapshot of the state of the sidechain respect to the last state that was validated or certified in the main chain. So it's like, okay, there is a new cross-chain update coming from the sidechain to main chain. I know this is the new state, and I keep a snapshot of that moment. The sidechain is progressing. Okay, I can also keep track of that, but I have this snapshot. If in any of this time the sidechain is terminated for some reason, then I have the snapshot of that moment, and I can use that to help other users, for example, to start the sidechain recovery mechanism, because the sidechain recovery mechanism works respect to the last state that was on the transaction leap. We have a section to explain that. Basically, the sidechain recovery transaction assume this data is available, so this last certified state. But for that, we need that some nodes, at least, they do this special role of storing this snapshot. I mean, it's not nothing complex. It's, at the end of the day, it's going to be probably just a plugin, a specific function in your node that takes a snapshot of the state and just stores it. The thing continue like as usual. A new cross-chain update, then I just delete the previous one. I have the new snapshot and so on. But yeah, that's a specific requirement for sidechain for the recovery transactions. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for the answer. As you said, more blog posts are coming, so make sure to check them out. We plan to publish them on a monthly basis, and also to have those AMAs, so that's the chance to ask all your questions. Another question now from Moonfern of the other users.
I will need to know what is an unauthorized account, because in principle, well, the Lisk ecosystem is totally permissionless, and any account can register a sidechain if they have enough fee, and the transaction is created as expected to like fulfilling the validity rules. It goes in the direction that, okay, I am a sidechain developer, I am creating my sidechain, and suddenly someone tries to steal my sidechain, well, steal the registration of my sidechain. If that goes in that direction, that shouldn't be a problem, because you can register this. At the end of the day, the only thing that the mainchain knows about the, let's say, protocol or how the foundation of the sidechain is the ID of the Genesis block, which, I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, everything is contained there. So an account can take that Genesis block, compute ID, and register it from an account. But this doesn't stop you from registering the same Genesis ID from your account and then start the sidechain as usual. The difference here will be who are the sidechain, the initial sidechain validators that you said. If you said yours, then this sidechain is going to progress as expected, and the other one, in principle, is not going to progress, because either they cannot generate a certificate because they don't have control of these sidechain validators, or if they put another set, then it's going to be a different sidechain. And at the end of the day, yeah, it's like you can always fork a blockchain easily, but who is? I mean, you need nodes to follow you to make it something real, right? So at the end of the day, yes, you can do this. Can be stolen in that way, but it's no big problem with that, because at the end of the day, it's like, okay, this is the real one. Also, in the interfaces, it's like, okay, this is the real one, and this one was just, I don't know, like something copying. But for the protocol point of view, it shouldn't be a problem. You will have two sidechain register with the same Genesis block ID, maybe different sidechain validators, and one is supposed to be progressing as expected, and the other one is just there doing nothing. So, yeah, from the protocol point of view, no problem.
Okay.
But maybe if that was not how the question was directed, let me know.
Yeah, so Moonfern, let us know if that answers your question. Meanwhile, Musti team is asking if a sidechain is terminated, can name be reused by others or only by the sidechain when they reconnect?
Yeah, that's something that we were discussing. Also, I think with the founders, with Max and Oliver, because I think it's not a technical problem, not a problem of a protocol or a performance, more a problem of the concept of what is the name, and what is the sidechain, like what is the real sidechain, what is. So, yeah, we decided not to. Sidechain is terminated, the name stays there. So the register name stays with the terminated sidechain, and therefore someone else trying to register the same name is going to get rejected because the name is there forever. Yeah, that was the direct answer. I think the idea was more like we wanted to have, okay, like always a connection of a unique name with a certain project, and not names flowing around, because it can be like, no, I will just terminate my sidechain and this name now goes for this other project, and so in principle, a name, when a name is registered, it stays taken forever, no matter what the sidechain is terminated or not. And I think the last part of the question, it was something probably misleading.
If a sidechain is terminated, can the name be reused or only by the sidechain when they reconnect?
Okay, the sidechain cannot be reconnected. So I wanted to clarify that. When the sidechain is terminated, that, let's say, sidechain account that represented the sidechain in the main chain is terminated forever. reconnection will imply to send a new registration transaction with a different name from a different account, the same Genesis block, because it's the same sidechain, or maybe they change it, but the idea is it has to be a different sender account because we need a different network identifier. And from that moment, yeah, the sidechain will be reconnected, but will be from a different sidechain account, and let's say from a different history respect to the main chain. But yeah, in principle, the idea of termination shouldn't be used as a feature to, I want to change this or that. The termination is, okay, you did something bad happened with the sidechain, either it is inactive or send bad data, and that's it. So yeah, like the termination should be, okay, like this project is done. And as I said, if this happens by accident, mistake, a new registration has to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. One question from Ultrafresh. He is saying thank you for doing this AMA. And the question is, given that you deploy a sidechain before registering it to the main chain, when do you think is the best time to release a production-ready sidechain? After interoperability?
Okay, good question. Very general. I mean, maybe people will have different opinions depending if you are a developer, if you are the business guy. From my point of view, what will be interesting before like having the production ready code or sidechain itself, we'll have to, okay, I have access to the version of SDK which has the interoperability feature, so I can use all these features, all these specific modules to have already the sidechain ready, or my blockchain ready for a future interoperability. So it's true that now, I mean, that doesn't mean that now you cannot do anything because this is still like a development in process. I will say almost everything regarding the custom logic, business logic of your application can be already started, written, but everything that is going to be around to make it a sidechain of the Lisk ecosystem, I would think it's better to wait for that release, and then we can properly, okay, now everything is finalized and this can be registered now or later. But yeah, I think probably the most important and like the one consuming more time and resources is the actual business logic or the custom logic of your sidechain, and this can be already started with the current SDK, and yeah, like then get that ready, and when the rest is released, will be super fast too, because it's basically almost every other module and interface is going to come out of the box from the SDK. So it's just like to be aware how they are going to interface each other, but yeah, that should be much faster than the previous part.
Yeah, I think it's good that you mentioned that, because also for the Lisk grant program, we see already people applying for the grant program to build this production-ready applications, and they want to obviously have a startup or to register a legal entity, and we hope that we will have them on the Lisk platform and in the ecosystem. So I think it's good that they can already start developing. And then once the interoperability is ready, then obviously, as you said, that's pretty easy.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll also be even easy to say, okay, now I have my independent blockchain developed by this version of the SDK with this custom logic, and then take the custom logic, which is a self-contained module, and then plug it in the interoperable sidechain. And I mean, that should be quite easy to do. Yeah. So I think that also makes sense to think in that direction.
Okay, cool. Thank you for the question, Ultrafresh. Another question, what would happen to the native assets of a terminated sidechain? Can they be recovered like the non-native ones?
Okay. Yeah, that one. So the straight answer is no. You cannot recover native tokens or assets in general from a sidechain that is terminated. Why? Because, well, basically, from the point of view of the user, that doesn't make sense in the way that these tokens were native to this blockchain, and now this blockchain is not part anymore of the Lisk ecosystem. So they will stay living in the blockchain, which is now going to be independent. The blockchain can exist as normal, but as an independent blockchain. And yeah, like it makes no sense that those tokens are now still flowing in the Lisk ecosystem. So in that regard, like the native tokens will be basically now part of that blockchain, and you cannot send a recovery transaction from the main chain to do anything with them. Also, it makes sense technically to have this limitation or this way of doing things because, as I said before, for example, the token model, we have these escrow accounts, and it's every sidechain or every blockchain which is taking care of their native tokens with this escrow account. And once that your sidechain is terminated, no other sidechain knows about which was the total supply and who had what tokens in what account. So I am the only one, my sidechain is the only one who had this information, and now I am terminated. So it's basically me with my own native tokens. And all the escrow amounts they can recover them in the independent blockchain, but that will be something outside of the Lisk ecosystem and done by them independently.
Okay. Well, thank you for the answer. We are still waiting for more questions, so please, feel free to ask in the chat anything you want to know. Iker is here to answer any questions or almost any. Meanwhile, I was curious to maybe you can tell a bit more about, we have this Lisk Interoperability blog post series, and we plan to publish every month a blog post. What would be the next one, or what can you tell us more of what people can expect from the upcoming blog post?
Yeah, so, well, I am not 100% sure of the topic of the next one. I have maybe two options. The thing is, we are following similar, let's say, journey as we did in the Lisk JS for those presentations. They were, of course, shorter and less detailed. But yeah, after Jan presented the general interoperability solution, then I presented this lifecycle of a sidechain. And if I am not wrong, I think the next one was the crosschain update, transactions idea, and the concept of how this works, which is basically the main building block of the interoperability in Lisk. So the thing is, I'm not sure if it is going to be the crosschain update transactions, the next topic, or is going to be crosschain messages. Both are like the main building blocks of the interoperability solution. One is the envelope that carries everything from one chain to another, all the information required, including the messages, and then the crosschain messages are the actual messages that are sent by users to other chains, to other users in other chains. So it's one of these two. I don't know which one is going to be, but one of these two is going to be the next one. And then we will cover all the all these topics even more, I think, in more detail in the next months. I think basically what we have now in all these 12, 40, I don't remember the number, all these slips that we have now properly specified in our research forum, we are now somehow putting them into a more like plain, easier to understand words. But at the end of the day, all these things are published in the research forum, and we are now somehow taking content from them and creating these blog posts which are easier to digest because they don't have like this a bit obscure and rigid specification sections that, I mean, it's not nice to read because it's very so that should be the idea. So this means that if you are really interested in knowing more, you don't need to wait for all these blog posts, especially if you have a technical background. You can just go to the research forum and then you have there all the lips with all the topics that covering the whole interoperability solution, which is already there.
Yeah, I think we definitely saw that a lot of work went into this, the lips and writing them and very well organized. But of course, for users or for people who have just a general idea about in general blockchain or interoperability, they easily read the blog posts, and we definitely need to make sure that we share them everywhere on social media. For me, at least, it's definitely more easy to read. Yeah, another question I see from the chat, what happens if there is a reorganization on a sidechain and there are assets locked on another chain? What about rollbacks on sidechains?
Okay, so if you are asking about the normal situation of a rollback in the way that, well, let's put it things in properly. So rollbacks can happen, but they cannot, with our current BFT consensual algorithm and with the one tailored for interoperability, with this BFT algorithm, we cannot have a rollback beyond the last finalized block. This implies, as you you can read this in the certificate generation and also in the cross-chain updates lips. This implies that you can never create a certificate for a block which happened after this last finalized block. This means if you cannot create a certificate for any block beyond that one, you cannot send information to any other sidechain or blockchain in general with information that happened after the last finalized block. So this implies that with that, all the information that is transferred in the ecosystem, that basically all these cross-chain update transactions migrate information from mainchain to a sidechain, from a sidechain to another sidechain via mainchain, all these cross-chain transactions, they will never carry an information which is not final. Information as in messages, changes of validators from the sidechain or anything else. So rollbacks shouldn't be a problem. We have the last finalized block. A certificate can be generated for that block and blocks before, but never for blocks after this one. So there is not going to be this problem of having like an inconsistent ecosystem in the way that now I reverted my blocks and these transactions now they were already sent to the other sidechain, but they are not now in the. No, this shouldn't happen because only finalized information is going to be flowing in the ecosystem, and it's a very important requirement for the whole thing to work. Otherwise, it will be an inconsistent ecosystem and will be a mess. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for the question, and thank you, Iker, for answering that. We are still waiting for more questions. We have a few minutes left, so make sure to ask all your questions. Meanwhile, I was curious, maybe you can tell us a bit more on what are you working now at the moment?
Okay. So let's say that just before Lisk.js, which was 20th of May, we had the big chunk of interoperability ready and published. And from that moment on, two things mainly happened in the last 2 months already. The first thing is basically now all this amount of work is on the platform team or our developers' hand, which is all these lips now like for them. So they have to basically they started with the implementation. This means we are having with them many meetings like design acceptance, like how this is going to be especially implemented, this part of the protocol, this other part. So we are doing some of these meetings with the developers. They are also reading, getting familiar with all the details in the lips. So we are having like a closer connection and working closer with developers than before, that it was like more pure research. So that's one of the things that we were doing. The other thing that's also hand by hand with the developers is now we have all this interoperability solution, and we want to somehow okay, we have this. For especially, it was like more like a requirement from development. It's like this interoperability solution is touching a lot of parts of, well, almost every part of the protocol, and we need a clean, standardized way of different modules to connect to each other in the way that how the interfaces of different modules. When I say a module, it can be like interoperability module, right, with all the interoperability things, together with the depots module. It's in charge of the votes and the delegates, and so how all these things are going to fit together and how they interconnect, which is what we call the chain architecture. So basically now we are writing some smaller, not so much research leaps, but those leaps are somehow defining like, okay, this is the depots module, it exposes this logic to other modules, and this is how it is going to interact, and what it implies for the state in the state model of any blockchain done by the SDK, how this depots module will affect the state. So we are defining that in a set of smaller leaps, like for the depots module, for the also we have the reward module now, the fee module. So all these components, and defining how they are going to talk to each other. So at the end of the day, when you put all of them together, well, some of them together, you will create a proper blockchain with the SDK. So these leaps are almost done. I would say in the next days are going to be all of them finalized, and we are going to also publish them as usual. I think already Alessandro published one yesterday, the authentication or the auth module leap. So yeah, this, for example, that leap is part of all these new leaps that we were doing. So basically, that was mainly the work during these two months. And now that this is practically done, like in the next days, those leaps are going to be published. They are going to show in the research forum. You will see them. But now we start the next phase of research, let's say, which is improving the interoperability research phase. And that will start basically in August already. We have already some set meetings to properly kick off this idea. So yeah, that will be from next week's on. And yeah, then these 2 months, it was these two things, right? The module leaps, writing them for that purpose of the chain architecture, and also the like collaborating with devs for like how we are going to implement this feature of interoperability and this other thing and so on.
Yeah, so research team is never resting.
Yeah, that's, well, I mean, I think it's a very good thing.
Yeah, that's true. Also coming up in August on the 24th, we just announced yesterday the mainnet migration. I think that's definitely something that we as a team are very proud of, and one of the biggest achievements so far, and also probably for you as well as a part of the research team.
Yeah, for us as the whole research team is super nice, and proud to see like all these things that we were writing in the last couple of years and so on, all these long and maybe a bit heavy leaps, they are now actually going to exist, right? Like they are going to be part of a real product. It's not just some papers, some PDFs in our webpage. It's actually something that will exist, and there is a whole platform, a whole network, decentralized network in the world implementing all these things that we were working on, and so for me it's also like very, I don't know,
awarding.
Yeah, to see that and finally seeing that on Mainnet is going to be a good day. But also like then once that this is done, we have again the interoperability one, how is the name, the Sapphire phase, right? With that, the whole interoperability will also come, and yeah, it's also going to be like, okay, all these hours that I spend researching, specifying things, now there is something there, like actual tangible working product.
Yeah, that's very exciting, and we all look forward for 24th of August. So yeah, stay tuned. Many nice and cool things are coming. Let's get the last question also from someone in the chat. How should Sidechain expect to handle deprecated features on the SDK?
I don't know if I totally understand. So the duplicated features, if you are talking about, like, for example, a specific module or a specific part of the protocol that has like different, for example, the block generation module, we have either depots, like the delegated proof of stake, or proof of authority. So these two are going to be, I mean, they cannot coexist in the same sidechain because they are doing exactly the same in a different way. So you will need to have one, one there, and you're going to have duplicated the same purpose modules, right? I don't know if the question goes in that direction. And then also probably is a better question for developers, how they are going to, like the whole architecture of how specific modules are registered. I think that they are, together with this chain architecture effort that we were doing in the last 2 months together with the developers, there will be this idea of registering modules into framework, if I am not mistaken, in the way that, okay, my blockchain, in principle, until it's not registered, it's not a sidechain. So my blockchain will have, I will register the depots module, so it's going to be a delegated proof of stake blockchain. It's going to have a custom fee module because I want to have something different from the fee system that the SDK gives. I will have the same authentication module and so on. So there is a specific command, I think, into the framework application to register all these modules, and that should be it. So if you are doing the development right, at the end of the day, you will have this list of modules registered that should all of them complete and form the blockchain. And yeah, of course, there will be like, you cannot register that 2 times the same module and these kind of things. But yeah, how that exactly works is the developers can answer that better. Maybe also, if I am not answering the question in the right direction, probably in our Discord channel, right, in developers, if you throw that question, probably it's going to be better answered than this. But yeah, that's my general idea of how that will work.
Okay, cool. Then that was the last question for today. So thank you, Iker, very much for your time, and thank you for, of course, the nice blog post. If you guys have more questions, just make sure to go on lisk.chat. So ask your questions there. Someone from the team will definitely answer. And make sure to check out the blog for the upcoming blog post the research team is currently working on. Yeah, so thank you everyone for being here. And let us know, of course, if you like this new format also for the research AMAs. Yeah, excited to do it again probably next month.
Thank you very much,
Thank
guys.
you. Thank you. Goodbye.
Ciao.